All right, so we're diving deep today
Into money.
into money. You guys gave us a ton of excerpts
Yep.
from A History of Money by Glenn Davies.
That's a good one.
And I've got to say, this is some really cool stuff. We're talking ancient barter systems, the rise of sterling, even the crazy world of 20th century banking.
It's going to be quite a ride.
It is. So, like, are you ready to uncover some seriously surprising origins of money? See how it's changed over time, what it even is and how it's, like, shaped, I guess, everything.
Yeah, I think money is something we take for granted.
Totally.
And we don't really think about
No.
where it came from or how it got here.
Right. And, like, one of the things that I thought was super interesting that the book talked about was, like, this whole barter myth
Yeah.
that we all think we know about.
Yeah, barter, it was so inefficient, right?
Mhm.
And so money just had to happen.
Right. But Davies is like, hold on a second.
Yeah, he's like, barter was way more complex than you think.
Yeah. He actually says barter has undeservedly been given a bad name in conventional economic writing, and its alleged crudities have been much exaggerated.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If barter was that bad, it wouldn't have lasted for so long.
Right. So what's the real story then?
Well, it seems like early money wasn't just about solving some, like, practical problem.
Okay.
It was also really tied up in social and cultural stuff.
Like what?
Like, think bride money, blood money,
Yeah.
the use of certain objects in, like, religious ceremonies.
So it wasn't just about, like, what the thing was worth,
Yeah.
but what it meant to people.
Exactly. Like, it's like giving gifts today.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about the price tag. It's about the thought and, like, the relationship.
Yeah.
Early money was kind of tapping into that same thing.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
It's like you're not just handing over a thing, you're handing over, like, a whole set of meanings.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've busted the barter myth,
I
right?
busted it.
Busted. So, what about, like, I don't know, the weird money? Because, the book gets into some really strange stuff.
Oh, yeah. Forget coins. Get ready for yap stones.
Yap stones, what are those?
Giant discs of stone, like huge,
Like, how big are we talking?
up to 12 feet across.
Whoa! You can't even fit that in your wallet.
No, you can't. And then there's whale's teeth in Fiji,
Okay.
And in some places, cattle were basically like walking capital.
Cattle. Like, moo money.
Pretty much.
I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, you can trade them, they reproduce, they provide milk, meat.
Yeah, and they can pull a plow.
Right. Multi-purpose money.
Exactly. These currencies may seem a little strange to us,
For sure.
but they totally worked in their context.
That's so cool. It reminds me of this thing that Davies mentioned about a yap stone that sank to the bottom of the harbor.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, it was lost, but people still considered it valuable.
It's like imagine your credit card sinking to the bottom of the ocean.
And still having money on it.
Yeah.
It's crazy how value can be so tied to, like, what we all believe, right?
Absolutely. It's a shared understanding.
Totally. Okay, so we've, like, busted the barter myth, seen some wild currencies.
What's next?
What's next on our money adventure?
Let's hop over to ancient Greece and Rome.
Ooh. Okay.
Their financial systems were way more advanced than you might think.
I always think of, like, philosophy and democracy.
Oh, yeah, they had that too.
Right. But they were also, like, big on coins, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
Silver coinage really took off with the Greeks, and it really powered their economy. Of course, we got to acknowledge the not so great part of that,
Yeah.
the role of slavery and silver mining.
Right. Important to remember that.
Yeah. But yeah, their banking practices were also pretty sophisticated.
Really? Like, what did they do?
Well, for one, they had institutions that specialized in, like, exchanging foreign currencies.
Oh, like the money changers you see in, like, historical movies?
Kind of. And they were already pretty good at managing loans and deposits, stuff we still do today.
So even back then, you see the beginnings of, like, the whole financial system.
Oh, yeah. The seeds were there.
Wow. This is all, like, way more connected than I thought it would be.
It's all a story, isn't it?
It is. And speaking of stories, let's talk about a currency with a serious one. The British pound sterling.
Ah, yes. The
It's-
pound. It's gone from these little silver pennies to, like, this global powerhouse.
It's really the story of England itself, the
Yeah.
Norman conquest, the rise of empire. It's all tied up in the pound.
It's pretty wild to think about.
Yeah. And, the book talks about King Henry II, back in the day.
Yeah.
He did all these reforms to, like, consolidate his financial control, make sure he was getting his taxes.
Sounds familiar.
Right. It's all about ensuring a more certain income with fewer leakages than formerly, as Davies puts it.
So basically, taxes are a tale as old as time.
Pretty much, government's got to get their money somehow.
True, true. But okay, speaking of changing things up, let's talk about one of the biggest game changers in money history.
What's that?
Paper money. Ah, yes. The paper revolution.
And get this. It didn't start where you might think.
Nope. Forget Europe. Paper money actually made its debut in China.
Whoa, seriously?
Centuries before Europe.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they were way ahead of the game. But, it wasn't all smooth sailing.
What happened?
Their first attempt at paper money. Total disaster.
Like what kind of disaster?
Massive inflation. Like rivals some of the worst we've seen in modern times.
Oh, wow. So they basically printed too much and it became worthless.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Classic case of too much money chasing too few goods.
Sounds like a lesson we're still learning today.
Yeah, managing that money supply is always a balancing act.
It is. Okay, so paper money eventually caught on, right? And banking kept evolving.
Oh yeah, things were just getting started.
But what happened next in Britain? Like, how did their banking system transform?
Well, buckle up, because we're about to enter the world of goldsmith bankers, the Bank of England,
Ooh, interesting.
and this whole shift of power from the monarchy to the City of London.
Power shifts. Always juicy.
Always. And it's fascinating how this all ties in with the rise of paper money.
Right, because that changes everything.
Totally. And here's where it gets really interesting. Davy says the symbol was still gold, but the substance was paper. And much of the real financial and political power had been silently transferred from the tower to the city and beyond.
That's like a mic drop moment right there.
Right.
Makes you think, who really holds the power today?
It's a good question. Governments, central banks, something else entirely.
Right. Big questions.
Big questions. And it leads us right into the 20th century, which is a whole other roller coaster.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Wars, depressions, wild economic theories, it's all there.
Can't wait to dive into that.
Let's do it.
The 20th century, huh? Talk about a wild ride for money.
Oh yeah, buckle up. This is where things get really interesting.
We're talking wars, depressions, new economic theories. Like, where do we even begin?
Well, I think the biggest thing that shaped this era was, well, the world wars, obviously.
That's right. Wars are expensive.
Yeah, and governments, they often end up printing more money to pay for it all.
Oh, right. Which, didn't we talk about that with China earlier? Like, that doesn't usually end well.
Not usually, no. Leads to inflation, devaluation, all sorts of problems. But then, after the wars, you see this new idea emerge.
What, like to fix things?
Yeah, kinda. It was called Keynesian economics.
Keynesian economics.
Yeah, it was a totally different way of thinking about how governments should, handle the economy.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's the gist of this Keynesian thing?
Basically, it says that governments should step in and, actively manage the economy, especially when things are going bad.
Okay, so not just, like, sit back and let things happen.
No. More like spend money, even if it means going into debt, to get the economy moving again.
So, like, use government spending to kind of smooth out the bumps in the road.
Exactly. And, it did work in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
but it also came with some downsides.
Like what?
Well, that increased spending often led to inflation. So, prices go up, money's worth less.
Right. Classic inflation problem.
Yeah. And some people argued that it made governments too powerful, too involved in the economy.
I see. So, like, it was a bit controversial.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And as inflation became a bigger issue, you see this other idea pop up. Monetarism.
Monetarism. Okay. So what's that all about?
Well, it's kind of the opposite of Keynesianism in some ways.
Oh, how so?
Well, monetarists believe that the most important thing is to control how much money is out there, the money supply,
Okay, and why is that so important?
because they think that's the key to keeping inflation under control.
So if Keynesianism is all about the government spending money,
Yeah,
monetarism is like, whoa, hold your horses. Let's not get too crazy here.
exactly. They think that too much government meddling can actually mess things up even more.
So it's like a tug of war between these two ideas.
Kinda.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because those debates are still going on today. Oh, yeah. People are still arguing about how much the government should be involved in the economy, the best ways to control inflation, all that stuff.
Wow. So it's like history isn't just about the past. It's still shaping how we think about things today.
Exactly. And speaking of history, the book also talks about this whole other area that I think is really fascinating.
Oh, that's it.
Third world debt.
Ooh, yeah. I have to admit, that's one area where I'm kind of clueless.
It's a big topic for sure. But the book focuses on this, like drive for financial independence in former British colonies.
Okay, so like how these countries tried to break free from, I guess, the financial control of Britain.
Exactly. And it goes through these different stages, like at the beginning of the 20th century, it was all about extending British banking and currency systems to the colonies.
So like a very top-down approach.
Totally. British banks setting up shop and major ports, trying to control the flow of money.
But was this really about helping those colonies develop their own economies?
It not so much. It was more about, serving the interests of the empire, making sure the money flowed back to Britain.
I can see how that would create some tension.
Oh, yeah, definitely. A lot of these colonies felt like they were being exploited, that their economies were being dictated by someone else.
And that feeling obviously fueled the whole push for independence, right?
Absolutely. Both political and financial independence.
Mhm.
And things did start to change after World War II.
How so?
Well, yeah, the collapse of the gold standard, the emergence of this thing called the sterling area.
The Sterling area, okay.
Yeah, it was kind of a way to try and manage things, but a lot of former colonies still felt limited by their ties to Britain. They wanted control over their own money, their own destinies.
And then, of course, you have the debt crisis of the 1980s.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
It feels like that's something that still has repercussions today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was this perfect storm of like rising oil prices, a global recession, and some really bad lending practices by Western banks.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It kind of was. These developing countries ended up with these huge debts they couldn't possibly repay.
What happened then?
Well, it was brutal. Austerity measures, social unrest, you name it. A lot of countries felt trapped, like the system was rigged against them.
That's really heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's a reminder that money can be a powerful tool, but it can also be used to create really unfair situations.
Yeah, no kidding. So we've gone from ancient barter systems to these huge global financial crises.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. Is there like a common thread through all of this, something that connects it all?
I think the main thing is to remember that money is never neutral.
What do you mean?
Like, it's not just this thing that exists out there in the world separate from everything else.
Okay.
It's shaped by people, by power dynamics, by culture, all of that.
So like to understand money, you have to understand the context, the history behind it.
Exactly. And speaking of understanding money, there's another idea that keeps popping up in the book that I think is worth exploring.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
This tension between, like, the quality of money and the quantity of money.
Quality and quantity. Okay, explain that one to me.
It's all about, like, what makes money money. Like, when you think about it, what makes gold valuable?
It's shiny.
Well, yeah, that helps. But it's also, like, scarce, right? You can just make more gold, and it lasts a long time. It doesn't, like, rot or rust.
Yeah, it's pretty durable.
So that's what I mean by quality in money. It's that stability, that reliability.
Okay, got it. So quantity is just like how much money is out there in the world.
Exactly. And, throughout history, people have been trying to figure out this balance
Balance between what?
between quality and quantity. Like, if you only focus on quality, you might end up with not enough money to, like, fuel the economy,
Yeah.
But if you just print tons of money.
You get that whole inflation thing again.
Exactly. It's like that 10th century China situation all over again.
Right, right. So you got to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, but that sweet spot is always moving because everything affects it. Politics, technology, you name it.
Makes sense. And speaking of technology, that brings us to, like, the big question, right? The future of money.
The million-dollar question, literally.
We've touched on digital currencies, decentralized finance.
Yeah. Crypto, blockchain, all that jazz.
Is that where we're headed?
Honestly, I think it could be huge. Like, imagine a world where you don't need banks or governments to manage your money.
It's hard to even picture that.
I know, right? But it's not as crazy as it sounds. Like, remember those Goldsmith bankers we talked about?
Oh, yeah, the guys in London who were basically creating money out of thin air.
Exactly. They were like the original disruptors. They figured out a way to, like, multiply the money supply using gold as a base.
And that became the basis for, like, most of our banking systems today.
Pretty much. So these new digital currencies, they could be like a 21st century version of that.
Whoa, that's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And just like back then, there are all these arguments about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right, like, is it going to make the system more stable or less stable?
Exactly. Some people think it's going to empower individuals, give them more control.
That sounds good.
Yeah, but others worry about all the risks, like financial instability or, people using it for illegal stuff.
So lots of unknowns, just like with any big change.
Definitely. But I think looking back at history can give us some clues. Like, think about how the U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency.
Yeah, like how did that happen?
It wasn't planned. It was this gradual thing driven by economics, politics, even a bit of luck.
So are you saying that the future of money might not be decided by governments or banks, but by like what people actually use?
I think that's a real possibility.
Yeah.
Like, if enough people around the world start using a certain digital currency,
It could just become the dominant one.
exactly. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to what's happening out there, not just what the experts are saying.
Right, because it's ultimately about what people choose to use.
Yeah, totally. And, for me, this whole deep dive has really highlighted how complex money is.
Yeah, it's not just about like buying stuff.
No, it's so much more than that. It's a store of value, a unit of account, and it's definitely a tool for power and control.
Like we've seen throughout history.
Right. And that's why studying the history of money is so important.
Because it helps us understand the world today, right?
Absolutely. It gives us this, framework for thinking about these big questions.
Totally. This has been such a cool deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's amazing how much history is packed into something as simple as a dollar bill.
Right. It's like holding a piece of the past in your hand.
Exactly. So, yeah, I would just say to anyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions. The history of money is still being written, and we're all part of it.
That's a great way to put it. And thanks for joining us on this journey through the history of money. Until next time, keep diving deep.